Why do we have a Second Amendment? Well, I want to talk a little bit about this story that happened down in St. Louis, the McCloskeys. Did you hear about this story? It was all over the news for a little while. People were making a big deal out of it. I don't know that it was what everybody thinks it was, and I don't know that it became what everybody thought it became. But here's the story in case you don't know. Apparently there was a protest. I'm not really sure who it was, Black Lives Matter, Antifa, somebody calling themselves that one thing or the other. I don't know. There was a protest. Apparently they made a wrong turn. And they end up, this crowd, these protesters, right? They end up at this gated community, at the entrance to this gated community. The gate's closed, and there's a sign on it that says no trespassing. Well, they proceed to break down the gate and go onto the property anyway. The McCloskeys come outside. The wife had a handgun, and the husband was holding some kind of, looked like an AR platform rifle. And they look like Mr. and Mrs. Rambo. So, a lot of people applauded that, rightfully so, to say, hey, it's about time somebody stood their ground. It's about time somebody stood up and said no. And that's exactly what they did. All they did was say to the protesters, not here, not in this neighborhood, get out of here. And they did. Peaceful resolution. But here's the thing about that that's gotten a lot of attention. You would think that there would be nothing to that, right? That there would be no more to the story. But the fact of the matter is the DA down there was talking about pressing charges against these people. Pressing charges. Pressing charges for what? For defending their property? For standing up to protesters who were breaking the law? Not respecting private property? For a lot of us that have been watching this stuff go on for a long time, we're not really too surprised by this. There was a story down, I think it was down in Delaware County. I don't think it was in Philadelphia. If it was down at the southern end. Young black man, 19 years old, armed. 5 other black men attacked him with baseball bats. They were armed. He shot to defend himself. I forget the exact results of it. I did a podcast on it. Nobody else was talking about it. I thought it was an important Second Amendment case. This kid got charged with murder or attempted murder or whatever it was. He ended up being acquitted after going through a whole trial. Imagine the trauma and dealing with that. You know what the DA's argument was? You know why the DA said that she felt it necessary to press charges in that case? Because he fired something like 13 rounds at 5 men trying to attack him. And she argued that there was no way that you fire 13 rounds in self-defense. So why is this happening? You got the McCloskeys down in St. Louis trying to defend their property, never fired a shot. The DA's talking about charging them. I don't know what exactly happened. I guess there was some kind of police follow-up. There was some questions about whether or not their firearms were taken away for a period of time. I don't think anything came of it. But who knows? Would you want to be on the receiving end of that? And now more than ever, it's really important to understand your rights and obligations under the law if you're going to use a firearm even in your own home. Even in your own home. So why is this distorted view of the Second Amendment? Why is it just being tossed aside so freely like this? And the short answer to the question is it's rogue DAs, district attorneys in these jurisdictions that just come up with these radical opinions. And law-abiding citizens, otherwise law-abiding citizens, trying to exercise their constitutional rights to protect themselves, to protect their property, to protect their families. And these DAs are charging them. Doesn't appear to be a racial thing. The thing down in Philadelphia, Delaware County there was black on black district attorney. What do you call that? No racial bias, I don't think. Just radical opinion. Now, there's some rumor going around that George Soros has bought a lot of these district attorney or provided funding for their elections, I should say. Philadelphia and St. Louis being 2 of the areas and big areas across the United States. How's that? I don't know, but I think that the tax-paying citizen, the so-called silent majority, quite frankly, has gotten a little complacent, and that's the main reason I wanted to come on here and do this video. If I got to talk to you about the importance of the Second Amendment, then so be it. We get caught up in all this different language, all these different back and forths about whether the Founding Fathers knew about the weapons that we would have today and was it for hunting and what about a militia? Hey, here's the basic thing. Here's what it all boiled down to. The Founding Fathers wisely believed that it was a person's inherent right to be able to defend themselves, life, property. Not only did they feel it was their right, but they felt it was an obligation. It was an obligation that people felt in the early part of this country. What happened to that? All of a sudden, we're going to give up that right. Some people want to. Some of us aren't quite ready to do that. So what do you do in the meantime? The Constitution's there. It hasn't been changed. It hasn't been lawfully changed. Seems to be a lot of people talking about that, but that hasn't happened. So why are these district attorneys going with these crazy radical opinions, and what do you do about it? Well, I think there's a couple things that we need to do. Number one, you need to go on the website for the United States Attorney General. You need to go on the website for your state attorney general, bookmark them, be familiar with both, and your town or city council. If you're down in St. Louis, you're in Philadelphia, you want to reach out to these people. Hey, I don't agree with this. I don't think this is appropriate. How's this district attorney still here? Start putting pressure on them. Show up for meetings. Listen, this is what the radicals are doing. This is what the activists are doing. This is the big secret. They have a digital campaign going on that they got a bunch of little keyboard warriors that they're sitting there and they're posting on social media, influencing politics that way, and emailing, pressuring these politicians and these government officials. Meanwhile, the silent majority sits back and does nothing, and the politicians don't hear anything, and they don't think there's any problem with it. And their whole view of this whole thing is completely distorted because they're not hearing from their constituents, the silent majority. Now, who do you blame that on? Whose fault is it, this whole rise of the silent majority? You're going to blame Trump? You're going to blame liberals? I think the responsibility is squarely in the mirror. I don't know. Do you have the time? I know people are busy. People have busy lives. People have a lot going on. Let me just say this. I'm going to leave you with this because I know a lot of you that listen to what I have to say and listen to my podcast, that you're very pro-Second Amendment believers in the Constitution. I want to just tell you this. Be very careful. I talked about this story down in St. Louis. That was very foolish what they did in terms of being smart, being tactical. And I think you got to think about this across everything, what you say online. There was a woman that Black Lives Matter group walked by her and said Black Lives Matter. Her and her husband were there. She yelled back, all lives matter. There was an altercation. The husband drew his weapon. They retreated. The couple goes to leave, and the protesters then ambushed them, basically shot the wife in the head, mother of a 3-year-old. You don't want to do that. Don't get into fights that you can't win. Try to avoid any fight for that matter. But especially in these times, you really have to think through, what's the best option for the situation? What's the best option for you? And are you aware of your legal rights and responsibilities and the legal climate in your area? And what are you doing to change it? It's important to the country right now. Hey, if you want to learn more about me or the podcast, go to ChristopherScottShow.com. You can listen right to the podcast right on the website there, and information about me. You can sign up for my email list. And if you have any comments or suggestions about this video, you can leave it right on the homepage at ChristopherScottShow.com. Thanks and have a great day.
Warning, this podcast includes unapologetic logic and reason and may not be suitable for all audiences. In a world full of nonsense, he's been called the voice of uncommon common sense. He sees the abnormal that many find normal. Author and award-winning speaker, he is Chris